Hello, and welcome to another special showcase video, this time around a video premiere of a particularly impressive new modding project, and one that's just really massive in scope, called the Abecean Isles by EJRS. And at the request of the mod author, we'll be doing a detailed look at this alpha preview for what is certainly one of the best looking and one of the most ambitious new landmass mods to be announced so far this year. But no time to dilly-dally, we've got a lot of stuff to show off today, so I'm just going to, have to explain things as we fly through the city here. So let's start out with what this project is. The Abecean Isles is a mine project that aims to eventually add a number of the islands found out in western Tamriel off the coast of Hammerfell, and, off into the sea a bit, to the game world of Morrowind. This will eventually include, in addition to Stros M'Kai, the islands of Herne and Cespar, and I really hope I'm pronouncing those correctly, and perhaps even more islands. I guess we'll see in due time. And obviously, right now, Stros M'Kai is the main island that you'll be able to visit with this mod. And of course, you can see the city of Port Hunding here in the background, which is already pretty far along in development, with a ton of interiors, NPCs, new dialogue, a massive ton of new assets, and much more, as we'll see in a bit. But first, we do need to just address, something real quick, because, doubtless, some of you are thinking, hey, wait a minute, wasn't there already a Stros M'Kai project? And to answer that question, yes there is, and in fact, there's two other Stros M'Kai projects. One that was last reported to still be in development by Star Wars Gal 9875, and more recently, Stros M'Kai in the Third Era by the Grey Wizard, which was released on the Nexus back in December in a just, alpha state. And that last one is doubtless the one that you're probably thinking of. We featured Stros M'Kai in the Third Era a few times in the past, and some of you might even notice a few just slight similarities between this Stros M'Kai and that one. Part of this is due to the fact that EJRS was originally helping out with the Stros M'Kai in the Third Era mod, including the creation of some new assets, which is why the two projects, share some rather similar designs, particularly with the iconic harbour entrance. Though this is also partly because, they're both based on the same source material, the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, so, some similarities are really to be expected here. But that's about where the similarities end. EJRS decided to take their project in a just completely different direction, with their, version of Stros M'Kai, focusing on a more unique and creative interpretation of Stros M'Kai, with the goal of making an island that had that same just weird alien vibe that Morrowind had, and basically doing away with the just revisions made to the Redguards of more recent Elder Scrolls games, like, the Elder Scrolls Online. Instead, EJRS is trying to build a unique culture, lore, and just a feel for the Redguards, more on par with the treatment of the Dunmeri cultures in Morrowind. And you can already see a lot of that here, from the different types of architecture to the ships at the docks here, and the dozens of different miscellaneous items that you'll find as you explore the city. And really, I have to say, the art style, as we'll see more of in a moment, is just really fantastic. This is just an amazing take on the island of Stros M'Kai. But before we move on to everything else that you'll find here, just real quick, I would like to point out that you'll find a link to the official Abecean Isles Discord server down below, which is also where you'll find an early alpha preview of this mod that you can download and install for yourself. Keep in mind, though, this project is still very much in development, with nearly daily updates, so, everything is still very much incomplete. And while this is a really cool mod to, load up in-game and just explore for a bit, it's not quite at the point where you should, keep it as a permanent part of your save game. And it'll probably be just, a little while before this mod is in an just ideal playable release state. But again, what's already here is just really impressive, and it's, definitely worth checking out. But anyway, with all that out of the way, let's just focus on the city of Port Hunding here, which is really a pretty massive city. And currently, Port Hunding has about, I would say 60 buildings in total here, and by the time it's completely finished, we'll probably have somewhere over 100 interiors, which is, quite a lot. And right now it has about, 30 or so finished interiors, and perhaps another dozen in various states of completion. And what's really impressive about this is that all this has been built largely by just one modder, EJRS, with some help of a couple of real-life friends over the course of the last 14 months. And already, the city is almost larger than Balmora, and about 3 times the size of the capital city of Skyrim in the Elder Scrolls V, which is, really quite the just accomplishment here. And, it really does feel like an actual city, with a pretty good sense of verticality, with a building sometimes closing in on narrow streets, giving parts of the city an almost claustrophobic feeling, while towers dot the skyline, and everywhere there seems to be a decent amount of foot traffic, with the occasional outdoor vendor with tons of realistic little details like, new Redguard style banners, rain catchers for the city's water supply, fishing equipment, dried fish, various ends, crates, barrels, and other containers, all of which just adds a sense of life and perhaps also a sense of an alien culture to this really one-of-a-kind city. Now, as some of you already know from the last, few times that we showcased a Stros M'Kai mod, the island of Stros M'Kai was the primary location that you got to play through in the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, which was released way back in 1998, or 1997. I forget the exact date, but anyway, while this is clearly a different take on the island of Stros M'Kai, you'll still find some similar elements from the original game, like the Dragon Tail Inn, the town square, known as the Plaza of the Three Princes, with a monument in the center based off of the, the original one from Redguard, and of course, the palace, and, all that. And likewise, the scene layout is, basically the same as the original game, at least, at the core here, with a fairly clear districts for the harbour, market, and old quarter parts of town. And fans of the original game will doubtless find a lot to like here in this unique recreation. And there's really a lot to see here. We could probably spend a good hour just, flying around the city and looking at various details. But there's more to Stros M'Kai than the city of Port Hunding. There's also the wilds of Stros M'Kai itself, much of which is still unfinished, but, there's a few things for us to check out here. And outside of Port Hunding, Stros M'Kai is a largely dry and rocky island, with 1 or 2 roads leading out of Port Hunding, and leading to some of the other points of interest on Stros M'Kai, like Saintport, which, hasn't been added quite yet, and some of the more distant locations on the far side of the island, most of which are, still in development. That said, you can get a pretty good idea of how the island will eventually look just by following the path here, with small inland rivers, rocky canyons, and even out towards the shorelines, where more than one ship has wrecked along the coast here, and where a would-be scavenger might, be able to find some fairly decent loot. And while we're exploring the wilds of Stros M'Kai, it's worth noting that EJRS is looking for help on the project here, particularly with regards to exterior development and to questing. And surprisingly, EJRS only had experience creating interiors before starting this project. Everything from building the exteriors of Port Hunding to creating the dozens of new assets, creatures, and animations that you'll see here were all learned while, working on this massive mod. And I've got to say, for someone who's, only learned these skills in the last 14 months, EJRS has done just a really impressive job here. But of course, having said that, more exterior developers and quest modders would go a long way to just, getting this project released faster. So if you have any interest at all in helping out with this mod here, please check out the project's Discord server, a link to which you'll again just find down below. Now, speaking of new assets and creatures, I'd like to just spend a bit of time highlighting some of the new things that you'll find on Stros M'Kai, starting with some of the just really unique wildlife. And as mentioned before, the author here is taking a page from Morrowind with providing a unique and alien environment to explore, and this naturally extends to the creatures that you'll find here, with some truly odd and alien creatures that you'll find amongst the hills, ravines, and seas of Stros M'Kai. From strange bird-like creatures with 2 sets of wings and 2 sets of eyes, to odd land-based creatures that might just perhaps remind you of the Nixhound or Kaguti of our native Morrowind, and still more ocean-based creatures like what looks like stingrays, and some sort of large shellfish-like creature, all of which comes with their own unique animations and behavior. And the really great accomplishment here is that these creatures really do fit in, I think, with the overall world of Morrowind, and also the aesthetic of Morrowind. No doubt they inspire an alien feel, but with a world where, silt riders exist, they feel just right at home, and are an excellent addition to both make Stros M'Kai stand apart, and to fit in with Morrowind at the same time. But taking a look at some of the other new assets here, and just returning to the city of Port Hunding, I'd like to point out some of the really cool cultural additions and details that you'll find in Stros M'Kai. First, I'd like to start off with some of the new artwork that you'll find decorating the sides of some of the buildings, as you can see here, with jade statues and other amazing little details. And again, like with the creatures here, this just invokes a strong sense of Morrowind, but with a distinct alien feel from the culture of the Dunmeri. And another cool little detail here is the signs for shops and various locations of interest around the city. Unlike the Imperials of the Empire, which, use traditional wooden signs, or the Dunmeri Morrowind, who use squaw skin and paper banners, the merchants of Stros M'Kai use a string of plaque cards, possibly made out of shellfish or just some other material here. And these cards have various symbols on them indicating the service and goods that each merchant offers. And this is exactly the sort of detail that just helps to solidify the fact that you're, in an alien land. And this also includes some cloth banners for particular, locations of interest, like different parts of the city. Next, I'd really like to highlight one of the more realistic additions added to Stros M'Kai, which is these rain catches that you'll find scattered across the city here. And because the island of Stros M'Kai is a largely just dry and barren island of minimal fresh water, the residents largely depend on rainwater for their day-to-day needs. The rain is collected through a wicker basket on top of a small cistern of wooden pipes that can be uncorked at the bottom to let water flow into a bucket and bottle, or just some sort of a container. And this is just the sort of detail that really adds a bit of, realism to the city here. And it just goes to show how much thought EJRS has put into the design of Port Hunding. It really is just an excellent little addition here. And while we're taking a look at some of the details that you'll find in the city here, let's just take a closer look at some of the vendor stalls that you'll find in the Market Plaza, where a number of merchants have their wares out on display here. And you can see a number of the new items that can be found on Stros M'Kai, including various types of food, pots, idols, and just other cultural items unique to the Redguards. There's also a new armor set worn by some of the guards here in Stros M'Kai, and I believe this is a Ukundan set of armor, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a sort of pale bronze type of armor. And real quick, you might notice a bit of jitter here with the NPCs, and that's partly due to a limitation with the, Morrowind's game engine, of just extreme distances out in the game world. NPC jitterness becomes just a bit of an issue, and Stros M'Kai is in the same location it should be based on the, the scale of the game world, so it's just a bit west of the island of Sturk from Province Cyrodiil. And of course, this means that Stros M'Kai is already compatible with Tower Rebuilt, Scum of the Nords, and Province Cyrodiil. But anyway, moving on, we're going to take a look at a few interiors here, where you can see just a few more of the new assets and items that you'll find in Stros M'Kai. And we're going to start out with one of the taverns. And really, these interiors are all just pretty great looking. They've got an excellent atmospheric vibe, good interior lighting, and of course, really highlight all the new items that you'll find here, of almost nothing from the vanilla game. Everything from the candles to the cups and dishware, and of course the furniture is brand new and created by EJRS for Stros M'Kai. And there's obviously been a ton of effort put into creating new assets here, and there must be at least a couple of hundred new assets in Stros M'Kai, which in addition to making this a unique and just one-of-a-kind landmass to explore, also doubtless be a major boon for a province mod for Hammerfell if, one should ever be made. But I'm getting off track here, so let's just, take a look at a few of the different houses and shops you'll find in Stros M'Kai. And again, there's about 30 to 40 interiors currently available in Port Hunding. And of course, the project is updated on a nearly daily basis, so more and more content is still being added here. And I don't know about you guys, but I love everything about the style and designs of these interiors, of all the little cultural details unique to the Redguards. They really do a great job of just showing that this isn't Morrowind, and that this is indeed a completely different land, a completely different people, and a completely different province. And speaking of things that are just completely different, taking a look at a bookshop here, you'll find a number of new books that have been added to the game, only unlike the more Imperial-style books of Cyrodiil Morrowind. Most of these books are actually scrolls with, again, some new and unique assets, which is just another little, difference and detail I really appreciate here. And, oh gosh, there's just so much I already love about this project, and it's still only in an early pre-alpha state. But it has so much potential, and there can be just no doubt that this is one of the most exciting new projects of 2019. And I could probably spend all day highlighting the various details and interiors here. There's just a lot of content already here for you to find. But I'm afraid we've come to the end of our showcase here. So instead, I'm just going to, encourage you to check out this mod for yourself. And again, a link to the project's Discord server, which also has a download link for the latest development build, can be found down below. And of course, if you have any interest in helping out with this project, please let EJRS know. And anyway, stay tuned for more updates on this amazing new landmass mod. And until then, I'll see you all next time.